Hi, everyone. This is Sam Collins, your coding and billing expert for Chiropractic and the H.J. Ross Company. Welcome you to another episode with ChiroSecure to always keep you up to date, always making sure your practice can continue to grow and to make sure your claims get paid. I'm the coding and billing expert, so therefore, what do we always like to discuss? Coding and billing, and of course, what really comes down to payment. As you're well aware, and I'm sure you've already seen it, the codes for back pain have updated. But what do these new updates mean? What are the new codes? What is the best utilization? And actually, should you even use back pain? And is there anything else that's changed? Well, ChiroSecure and the H.J. Ross Company are always here to make sure that your changes or the changes are always something you're made well aware of. So let's go ahead and get to the slides, get right to the point, if you will. So let's move forward here. And oops, I went too fast. This is going to be the update that's a chiropractic primer. We're going to be very chirocentric. What do I care about? The things that occur for chiros. So what's going on? Of course, October 1st is when the changes update. So this is where I think a lot of confusion comes in because people wonder, well, when do the 2022 codes begin? Well, they actually begin October 1st of the year before, which has been true for every year there's been an update, even before ICD-10. So always keep in mind the date of change is October 1st. But what's important to know is when do I use these and how do I use them? Because what if I see a patient on September 30th or earlier, and then I bill it sometime in October or November? If the date of treatment is before October 1st, you will continue to use the old code. If the date of treatment is after the new code. So for the first month, there's often a lot of confusion about this because which one should I use? So make sure you don't combine dates of service that are before or after. They have to be separate claims, but I would assume probably you're billing out fairly timely. So everything right now should likely be with the new codes. Keep in mind, though, if you're rebilling an old code, make sure to have the old code if the date of service was before October 1st. However, I've had some calls and they said, hey, Sam, I've got denied. Well, what I will tell you is I've never seen a denial from the insurance, but what I'm seeing a lot of is your clearinghouse has. Your clearinghouses sometimes aren't up to date, and there's nothing more frustrating to me than you're trying to bill correctly, and the people that should be doing it and stay up to date aren't. So check with your clearinghouse if you're getting a rejection, because it's likely not the insurance. Well, as I mentioned, every year there's updates, and you'll see here there's a lot of codes. Some years, and this dates back to the first update in 2017, where there's some years like 2,360, but the truth is we want to care about what's changed for us. So by example, last year, everyone goes, well, what were the code changes? The reality was, what were the code changes last year that were significant to chiropractic? For the most part, those headache codes, the R51 went to R510 and 9. So even though there were 490 additions, it was really only two that applied to us. Well, what about this year? This year, we look at the codes and go, okay, well, now there's 72,748 codes, 159 additions, 32 deletions. Here's just the truth. You're going to focus in again on what is specific to chiropractic. Regardless of 72,000 codes, none of you are using that many. In fact, I bet if I go through your offices, and I teach continuing ed across the US, I would say the average chiropractic office probably uses no more than 15 or 20 codes on a regular basis. And of those 15 or 20, there's probably less than 10 that are very regular. So what we care about is making sure, do I have the codes that I'm using have any effect on what's happened? Well, this year is a big one because low back pain is updated. Now, low back pain, the code was M545. That's now been updated to 3 new versions, but let's talk about what is lower back pain. The approximate synonyms for lower back pain are what you think it is. It's just back pain. Acute, chronic, could be related to pregnancy with radiculopathy, mechanical, or we'll say lumbago or groin pain. My statement to you would be, I would recommend not using back pain if you have a better code to describe the pain. It will give a better relationship of what you're treating as opposed to just saying back pain. Would it be better to say lumbar sprain or strain? I would say certainly. However, back pain is still a good code. It's viable, particularly if it's a very mild or simple problem. So for this year, what we've updated now is M5450 goes to the low back pain unspecified. So that's kind of your generic, I don't know what's causing it code. Then there's M5451 for vertebrogenic. Now, when I first saw that, I was excited, like, oh, something related to the spine. Sounds very chiropractic. We'll talk about that because it's not as much as you might think, but nonetheless says vertebrogenic. Then the third one is M5459, and that is the code for other. Now, most people go, well, what does other mean compared to unspecified? Well, we'll go through the details of that to make sure there's a good understanding of why you would use any one of these codes, or maybe a better code might be available. Well, let's talk about first the unspecified low back pain. Unspecified says non-specific low back pain is defined as low back pain not attributable to any recognizable known specific pathology. So in other words, what you're really saying with M5450, let's be clear, is there's back pain and I don't know why. And my rule would be, as a doctor of chiropractic, I kind of hope you know why. And of course, that's what I would diagnose. Pain is almost always there when you don't know the underlying condition. Like there's pain there, but I don't know why. So for me, this wouldn't be one I would use because I would assume there's something else that's causing it that you could code. Could be as simple as spondylosis, radiculopathy, all those types of things could be there. It's still a viable code. Here's what's important. If you are using back pain, M5450 is a code for just saying there's back pain, but you're not giving any real description of why there's back pain, but just back pain. Well, how about this one, M5451, vertebrogenic low back pain? Vertebrogenic pain is specifying the origin of pain is from the vertebra or the spine. Now, that may be very chiropractic. You're like, ooh, that looks good. However, this code is to distinguish specifically lower back vertebral end plate pain. So the reason this code actually became a code is they wanted a code to describe vertebral end plate pain. I would have suggested they probably should have just called it that, but nonetheless, be careful. This code is not for saying, oh, there's something related to the spine, such as a sprain or a strain, anything of that nature. This means literally from the bone itself. And so I would say, not that it's a code you couldn't use, it probably likely would not be typical, okay? You would need a covered specificity towards that it is vertebral end plate pain. So I would say not likely one we would use. So spine-related conditions like sprain, strain, there's a code for it. So saying vertebrogenic, again, I want to focus, means coming from the bone itself. Well, what about this other code, other? So we have unspecified and other. Well, other means you can name it, but it doesn't have its own specific code. By example, have you ever heard of the condition Facet syndrome? I would make an argument that this code could be used for Facet syndrome because you can name what it is, but there is no specific code for it. By example, if you looked up Facet syndrome, if you went all throughout the code system to look for it, you actually wouldn't find a code that literally says Facet syndrome. So how do I code that? Well, using a code like this would do so because you're able to specify it's Facet syndrome. However, I would recommend not because there's a better code that's called other specified dorsopathies, which would be for lumbar spine M5386. So always kind of look a little bit better and be more of a student of coding. I'm not saying these codes are wrong, but they just describe a simple symptom. And if you're describing a simple symptom, there's intended that there's a simple recovery. Well, maybe the end plate pain a little bit different, but nonetheless, they're expecting not very many visits. So I'm going to say from a best practice standpoint, what should I do? M5450 or M5459 would be the best option for a chiropractic provider to just simply code back pain. Unknown reasons 50, known reasons 59. But I would go, if you have known reasons, why do you use a 59? Why don't give the known reason? The best practice, in my opinion, is to not code pain, but code the reason. What is the reason for the pain? Is it a sprain? Is it a strain? Is it radiculopathy? If you indicate radiculopathy, do you have to tell me it's painful? Well, I guess you could if you want, but I would suggest, radiculopathy with pain, the pain adds nothing to the equation. By example, if you saw just radiculopathy, what would be the number of visits you think a person would need compared to radiculopathy with pain? Well, could you have radiculopathy without pain? I guess, but you kind of get my point. Focus in on the reason more than the symptom. Not that the symptom is necessarily wrong. But one thing I'm going to make important here, it says you may not code low back pain spine or low back spine pain with lumbar disc. So be very conscientious. This is called an exclude, and I see this come up quite a bit. I do a lot of consulting, seminars, and one-on-one with you, and I often get, Sam, my claim got denied. And what they've done is they've included back pain with lumbar disc. And I want to make clear to everyone, you cannot code spine pain with a disc code. In fact, I would say, why are you telling me it's painful? Isn't disc automatically sort of that? It would be akin to if you coded an ankle sprain, would you go, oh, I better tell them it's also painful? Pain is kind of inherent. So understand pain codes are mostly when there's pain and you don't know why. If you have the why diagnosis, you don't have to tell me it's painful, but do be clear on this. If you were to code lumbar disc with a spine pain code, the claim is rejected because it's an exclude. You may also not code pain with lumbar strain. Now that's kind of weird, but that sort of makes sense. It's either a strain or you don't know why and it's pain. So you get kind of that unspecified, if you will. So focus in on the specificity. Think of it. If I tell you sprain, what is the connotation of the number of visits in care plan compared to if I just say pain? Pain's kind of like going, I don't know why it's there. It's just hurting. Now, if you're going to treat someone for a few visits, I'm all in. But if you're going to treat more than a few visits, I want a reason behind that care plan. Now, what else has changed for this year, though? There is a new code. This is brand new. There's a new code for a cervicogenic headache. Now, notice most of you are going, I didn't know that changed because everyone focused on back pain. We always want to look a little deeper. H.J. Ross in our seminars, we focus on that. Here's the new code. G as in George, 4486. Now, cervicogenic headache for the first time now has a code. Before you had to use the other specified and kind of later say it's cervicogenic. Now they realize, no, can the neck cause headaches? In fact, it's a secondary headache to the neck. In other words, the neck is the problem, but the perceived pain is usually in the head, typically associated with reduced range of motion and pain. So again, makes a lot of sense. It gives me a little bit more specificity than just saying headache. And I want you to think along these terms. Could you have a patient that has a migraine and still call it a headache? Could you have a person with a cervicogenic headache and still call it a headache? But think of if you say cervicogenic compared to headache, it's more specified and generally is going to give a little bit better reason for the type of care, length of care. There's some other updates as well. These aren't really as critical. In fact, most years, there's lots of updates that have nothing to do with us. By example, though, I think we're all familiar with Sjogren's syndrome. Now, Sjogren's syndrome has always had a code. However, the code always indicated Sika syndrome, which is for the corrective conjunctivitis. And of course, Sjogren's syndrome is often associated with things like rheumatoid arthritis. Now, is this a primary reason for care? Probably not. But at the same token, could it be a complication or comorbidity? Absolutely. There's also some new codes that I think a lot of people may not have seen. They're non-radiographic spondyloarthritis. So in other words, there's spondyloarthritis, there's significant arthritic changes, but on x-ray, it's not really imaged. Now, so this doesn't mean you've taken an x-ray or that you didn't take an x-ray and there's arthritis. This is literally, there's an arthritic problem and symptoms, if you will, but no discernible major arthritic problems that you can see on the films. And there's a condition for that, and that's why they updated those codes. Now, would that be a code we use very often? May or may not, but I always think of it as a complication. Is arthritis alone a reason for care? No. Everybody has arthritis, but when arthritis is very painful, then I would suggest it would be. So now that's a situation where I might code spondyloarthritis, or excuse me, arthritis of the spine with pain to indicate there's a significant amount of pain associated. So again, that's maybe where pain comes in. But anyway, there's a new code now, even on x-ray when it doesn't show, but it's still present with the signs and symptoms. Also, there's a new code for headaches. Or excuse me, for headaches, I said that already. Excuse me, a new code for cough. Now you might think, Sam, why are you bringing up cough? Well, cough is not something that we would obviously treat. It's not part of the chiropractic realm, if you will, for neuromusculoskeletal. But they've added some codes to distinguish the cough for things like acute, subacute, chronic, and so forth. But here's why I bring it up. Not so much that you'd ever use it. What if your patient has significant coughing while they have back pain? While I may not code it directly, I want to document that because a lot of coughing or that thecal pressure, if you will that irritate back pain, neck pain, or pain just about anywhere? Absolutely. So I want you to always think of when you're diagnosing, am I giving the fullest picture of my patient? Because if you're saying my patient needs 20 visits, I'm all in. But does your diagnosis equal that it's 20 visits? That's the critical part. So remember, for diagnosis, chiropractors are paid for neuromusculoskeletal conditions. Now, I'm not saying you can't code and treat a lot of things. I'm talking from insurance reimbursement. It's neuromusculoskeletal. So do pay attention. Most insurances produce lists of codes that they do and don't allow types of codes. For instance, Aetna, Cigna, and others. And if you use a code that's not on the list, like Medicare, the claim will be denied. By example, I'll throw one out. If you were to code Aetna insurance, a thoracic strain code, S29012A, it would be denied. So it's important to note that always know not only neuromusculoskeletal, but what codes are on the list. Well, that's one of the things we do with our company. We always want to update you. So here's just a quick note from our site. our news section at HJ Ross Company updates you on what's new and what's happening. And you'll see here, we updated in September the new codes. Because think of it, where are you getting your updates from? Do you have some place to go that always gets you there? Members of our service always can be updated. So take a look at our company. Go to our site. We're here to help. We partner with Cairo Secure to make sure you're getting paid. If your claims are being denied and you're going, oh my God, what's happening with CPT for the new year? What other codes have changed? Or what's the best code? Or, oh, what's the other exclude, Sam? We're here to help you in that way. So HJ Ross is always going to be your resource. I appreciate you all. And next week's guest will be Mark Student. Pay attention. Otherwise, thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you next time.